different name. I shall call you Tom's Holland.
Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Cameron Reigle.
And welcome to the premiere installment of our series of spotlight episodes on Star Fox Adventures, which, of course, has just celebrated its 20th anniversary the previous week. And we got the buyout episode out of the way so we could focus for a few weeks, minus some mini episodes that may interject throughout the run of these episodes. So we could just focus on Star Fox Adventures without having the shroud of the 20th anniversary of the Rare buyout also in the way. So
yeah, we're going to have enough hanging over this game as it is.
Yeah. So really quick, two things. One, we are not going to go too in-depth about Dinosaur Planet itself, as in everything that existed in the game before it became Star Fox Adventures. If you want to hear us talk about that, you have many options throughout the history of the Kongversation, but I will specifically point you to last season. Cameron and I did an episode at the beginning of Season 9 talking about the Elite Dinosaur Planet ROM. And then later that season, Steve McCorkle from off of Rare Gamer came to the show, and he and I discussed even more context from that leak. So we get into the stuff of Dinosaur Planet that didn't really make it into Star Fox Adventures. And we will be discussing Dinosaur Planet specifically on this first part of the Spotlight.
There might be some redundancies with our old episodes, but it's kind of unavoidable talking about the context of this game.
Yeah, we've never done a spotlight on Star Fox Adventures, and I always thought, well, we'll wait till the 20th anniversary. And, that seemed like a pretty wide gulf in the early days of the Kongversation. Because, in the early days of the Kongversation, we were approaching the 20th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country. And Star Fox Adventures is sort of on the other side of the timeline of the days of Rare and Nintendo working together. The original DKU 25, the first 25 games in what DK Vine considers the Rare shared universe. So we're finally here, the last 20th anniversary of the original 25 games. So this is long overdue, though, because Star Fox Adventures is a game that we both love. Cameron and I think, I wouldn't dare say that we adore it the most out of everyone on the current DK Vine staff, but I feel like it comes up with the two of us more often than it does others.
Yeah, I have a lot of fondness for Star Fox Adventures, and particularly I have a lot of fondness for it as a Star Fox game, which I know is pretty unusual.
Yeah, there is this kind of dividing line in the Rare fandom of, well, you can like Star Fox Adventures or you can mourn what Dinosaur Planet could have been. And I don't think you and I are in that boat. We are very much, we love Star Fox Adventures as is, and we wouldn't really want to explore that alternate timeline. Like we were talking about on the last episode, sometimes you just have to take your losses and celebrate the good you got in the universe you're in, rather than dwelling on things too much, and then you suddenly find yourself in an even worse scenario. So I'm thankful we got Star Fox Adventures, and it did give us a lot of good stuff, even if Star Fox in general is kind of in a weird place right now, and it's in a really weird place if you are a fan of everything Rare added to Star Fox, which is kind of in this sort of closed-off trilogy of games that we call the Dinosaur Planet trilogy, but it's
and occasionally Smash Brothers, and
a reference here or there But as far as characters and continuity and just building narrative and character journey, it's kind of just this closed off 3 games, and now we're just stuck in this endless nebulous cycle of reboots or retellings of the same stories.
Right now, I'm kind of worried we're not in a cycle of anything with Star Fox.
Yeah,
so, that's a bit more concerning.
We keep telling people to buck up and believe in the positive rumors for Donkey Kong. We can't do that for Star Fox. We don't have anything to go off of there.
No.
But we do have our memories, and I'm going to cherish those at the very least. So, number 2. We are going to be taking calls for the Spotlight series, but because of the way Star Fox Adventures is structured, which there's a lot of backtracking, it is a little confusing at times to really break up the game in any cohesive structure. Like,
yeah, we can't really do like Thorntail Hollow,
yeah,
or Dark Ice Mines. We gotta kind of keep going back and forth.
We can't really say give us your calls on worlds 1 through 4. You can break it up, I guess, by force point temples and how many times you visit them. But we're going to be taking all of the calls for this Spotlight series for your thoughts on Star Fox Adventures in the concluding chapter. So feel free to call the DK Vine hotline at 1-202-630-VINE. That is 8463 on a touch-tone phone. Feel free to call in. Touch-tone phone. What am I, grandpa? Anyway, that's what they said. That's what they say. That's what they said back in the day. If on a touch-tone phone, as opposed to a rotary phone, you know. But anyway, call in to the DK Vine hotline. Give us your thoughts. We've already gotten a few calls. I'm not going to play them on this episode, but rest assured we will play them at the end. So go ahead. Feel free at any point before the last episode is recorded. All right, Cameron. Well, Star Fox Adventures. Now, before we go talk about Star Fox Adventures and talk about Krazoa Palace and Thorntail Hollow and Icicle Mountain? Is it what is it?
I think it's just Ice Mountain.
Ice Mountain, yeah. You feel like it should be Icicle Mountain because Ice Mountain is just blunt. It's just blunt in there. Mountain and Snowhorn Waste.
It's like a synonym for Icicle Pyramid, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah. Before we talk about all of that and talk about the goodness that was the game itself, we've got to talk about the history. And to really talk about the history of Star Fox Adventures, especially as it relates to the Kongversation and DK Vine and the Donkey Kong universe, we have to go back. We have to go back to 1997. And that was the year of Star Fox 64, but it was also the year of another game that weirdly more directly ties into Star Fox Adventures than any other game, and that's Diddy Kong Racing. The beloved Diddy Kong Racing, because Diddy Kong Racing was, of course, this ad hoc game that was plugged into the schedule to make up for the fact that Banjo-Kazooie was delayed until 1998, and Nintendo didn't have a big holiday release in 1997 because they were counting on Rare to deliver Banjo-Kazooie. And so when Pro-Am 64, the RC Pro-Am spiritual successor on the Nintendo 64, that was actually very close to being a complete game. And as we've discussed many times here on the Kongversation, it was decided by Nintendo that, hey, you know, we could actually market this as our big holiday game, but it needs a marketable star. We need to plug in a character that the kids love. And so it was decided it should be a Donkey Kong character. Rare chose Diddy Kong and made it Diddy Kong Racing. And by virtue of that, by virtue of it getting bumped up in the release schedule, by virtue of it being then absorbed into a pre-existing series as this starring role for Diddy, it had the effect of backdoor piloting a couple of other Rare games that weren't intended to be spin-offs of Donkey Kong, but by this quirk of fate, effectively became Donkey Kong spin-offs. And of course, that is Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Pocket Tales / Conker's Quest / 12 Tales Conker 64 / Conker's Bad Fur Day. Those games weren't supposed to be coming after Diddy Kong Racing. They both did. And that had the effect of then creating this shared universe that we call the Donkey Kong universe. You may refer to it as the Rare Shared Universe, Diddy Kong Racing universe. I don't know how you define it. There is no one omni term for it, but we at DK Vine do call it the Donkey Kong universe. Although I am sheepish using that term, when directly referencing Rare today, because I'm sure they don't want to think that they don't want people to think they're getting away with something by acknowledging, Donkey Kong in any way where they can't. But Diddy Kong Racing did have this effect, though, on the fan base, where, we looked at it, we saw Banjo-Kazooie, we saw Conker, we were like, wow, 2 spin-offs out of Diddy Kong Racing. I wonder who else will get a spin-off out of Diddy Kong Racing. It has this wide cast of new characters. You could do so much with so many of these woodland critters. And so that sort of set this unrealistic expectation game of who will be the next Diddy Kong Racing character to get their own game. And this was something that was just in the air from late 97 through 2002, and even later than that. When will we get another game starring a Diddy Kong Racing character? And if you weren't around for this, I can't really relate to you what it felt like, but it really did feel like the sky was the limit, that there were so many possibilities.
Especially if you lacked which a lot of us did, the context of why Banjo and Conker and Diddy were in this, because it does kind of seem like this is a Wild West of these characters next ticket to stardom. It like seeing the cast of SNL and ooh, which one of these people is going to have a movie career next?
Yeah, right. Yeah, somebody then just ended up being the Chris Kattan. But I think that, even those of us who had the context, I knew Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Quest were announced before Diddy Kong Racing. I knew that had things gone differently, they would not have been proper spin-offs. But I think it was still in the air, when's Tip Top going to get his own game? When are we going to get a bumper game? And in actuality, several characters were either considered for games for real, briefly kicked around, or had been considered for games at Rare at one time or another before they were reworked into Diddy Kong Racing.
I get the impression almost that Diddy Kong Racing is sort of this internal toy box at Rare.
Yeah.
Where if you have an idea and you just need some kind of placeholder to slot in, pick something out of the Diddy Kong Racing chest and put it in, and you might leave it there or you might take it out.
Yeah. And it's especially amusing, after the buyout, where Rare retained most of the intellectual property for the game, sans the name Diddy Kong Racing and, Diddy Kong, and Crunch, because Crunch was retroactively made a Kremlin when they added Diddy Kong, and, you've got to shore up those Donkey Kong ties. So let's say that this alligator or crocodile character is a Kremlin, and then we sort of cede that to Nintendo 5 years later when we divvy up who gets what. But
yeah, real good narrative choice that unfortunately kind of means he's not showing up in anything.
Yeah, and Nintendo has had Donkey Kong Racing games after this, and he still didn't show up. But Pipsy, of course, was a reworked character of Kev Bayless's, Astro Mouse, who, Astro Mouse didn't really look like Pipsy, but he reworked her into this character, Pipsy.
I mean, looked like her in the sense that it's a mouse modeled by Kev Bayless,
right?
But very different, clearly very different theming in mind.
And now we've got members of the fan community who still want Pipsy to have her own spin-off game where she's a spacefaring explorer, let's make Astro Mouse a reality. Tip Top, of course, would become a minor reoccurring character in the Banjo-Kazooie series, and we still don't know for sure the basis of that. If there was a turtle already in Banjo-Kazooie that they then renamed Tip Top after Diddy Kong Racing to help sort of create this greater cohesion. I mean,
if like the two teams just like the same pun because you also have Tanked Up in Banjo Pilot. It's
or if the Diddy Kong Racing team used the name Tip Top from the Banjo-Kazooie turtle. We don't know. It just, they have radically different designs because the Diddy Kong Racing Tip Top very much looks like that Kev Bayless art direction, while the Banjo-Kazooie Tip Top is obviously Ed Bryan's handiwork.
And we've seen that, like, when they were prototyping what would eventually become Connect Sports, they were using Tip Top in, like, a sort of bowling game.
It was like, was it curling or was it bowling, or it was something like that?
I think it might have been curling.
Yeah.
It's a very, like, the only context we have from it is like an off-camera footage of a presentation slide, and it just looks so surreal.
Yeah, the original Fast and the Furious, which had a plethora of DKR elements in there, but that it would also include a TT costume for your own human being in the game. And of course, much later, TT would be cruelly teased in Sea of Thieves as a potential asset, a potential character, this ambiguous watch that is TT that you could hang in your ship. And I can talk about this because Greg Mails just blatantly shared this on Twitter, and I was like, all right, it's fair game now. I can talk about it. But so I
don't get any notes. It was bowling.
It was bowling.
Yeah, it was. Maybe it wasn't the best bowling ever, because it could have had Tip Top.
But yeah, TT was in the beta version of Sea of Thieves, which I did get to play when I was at Rare, and I did get to interact with TT, and I got to hold him in my hands, and I got to put him in my pirate ship, and it was the best thing ever. And of course, TT has not shown up in the final product of Sea of Thieves, but don't worry, we're still going to make that happen. I'm still fighting tirelessly for TT and Sea of Thieves. And maybe Chris Alcock was serious when he alluded to the possibility that his novel character, Tom Tuggs, was reincarnated as TT. He didn't seem to dismiss it. He seemed to actually feed that fire. So hope springs eternal for TT. But at the end of the day, Diddy Kong Racing is more of a series of failed spin-off attempts or have-to-bake, never to completion ideas for spin-offs. And, aside from the games retroactively made spin-offs, of course, Banjo-Kazooie and Conker. And weirdly, it was Banjo-Tooie, of all games, that would expand the Donkey Kong universe the most. Because it has more spin-off claims than even Diddy Kong Racing does now, because you've got, from Banjo-Tooie, it's Mr. Pants, you've got the modern reimagining of Saberman into Saberwolf GBA, you've got the Captain Black Eye thing with Sea of Thieves, and of course, the many journeys of Royston the Goldfish. So Banjo-Tooie ultimately pulled off what Diddy Kong Racing could not, but there was another character associated with Diddy Kong Racing that probably has the worst luck out of all of them. And that ties in specifically to the discussion we're having today. And I, of course, am referring to Timber the Tiger, the second protagonist of Diddy Kong Racing. Because after having Pro-Am 64 stolen by him from Diddy Kong, Timber was originally the main character, hence Timber's Island, hence the whole game revolving around his attempt at expelling Wizpig from his...
He's also just a very, Diddy-like archetype, because he's a kid in a baseball cap.
Right. A rare baseball cap as opposed to a Nintendo baseball cap. Completely different characters here. But, Timber was originally the star of Diddy Kong Racing. And in fact, we said, about Astro Mouse, Kev Bayless has said he also toyed around with this tiger character, Timber, before Diddy Kong Racing even. So he's been kicking around for a while there. And you clearly see the Kev Bayless influence. As you just said, he's basically Diddy Kong, and Kev Bayless was the one who gave us Diddy Kong. So anyway, but the director of Diddy Kong Racing, Lee Schuneman, is that how you pronounce it? I never know how to pronounce it.
I believe so.
Okay. He, after completing Diddy Kong Racing, I was like, what am I going to do next? And he toyed with the idea of having Timber be the star of the follow-up game. Like, let's just take Timber, let's give him his own adventure. And that would not just be any adventure, that would be a time-traveling adventure. So little is known about this first version of Dinosaur Planet. But according to Kev Bayless, Timber was going to be a time-traveling tiger with a rucksack, little fingerless gloves, a baseball cap, and a small dinosaur for a sidekick. So effectively, what became Dinosaur Planet and what became Star Fox Adventures started off with Timber. And you can clearly see that evolution from Timber to Saber to Fox McCloud. But, oh, poor Timber. Poor Timber.
He cannot catch a break, this poor kid. Just constantly shunted out of the spotlight for somebody else.
It's funny, during the buyout era, when, Rare was first with Xbox, and it still felt like the world was full of possibility, even though we now have this split between the franchises, Nintendo on one side, Rare and Microsoft on the other. I thought, hey, Timber is effectively Diddy Kong. Maybe Diddy Kong without the experience, Diddy Kong without the self-assurance, the confidence. It would be great if Rare would just do we didn't even have the term spiritual successor back then, but it would be great if Rare could effectively make Donkey Kong Country 4, but with Timber as the star and his whole family, and let's just explore that, and let's just have them be XPs for the Kongs. And, we would have eventually sort of get that with Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair and Platonic, but, it was just this desire to do something more with Timber has always been with the diehard fans of Diddy Kong Racing. It's still with me today. But we didn't even know about this history of Dinosaur Planet, that before Saber, there was Timber as the star of the game, and it revolved around him. And before it even, took place on an extraterrestrial planet, it was just Timber traveling through time.
And it seems like the dinosaur theming just kind of grew to be a much bigger part of the project. There's this through line, I guess, from Dino Domain in Diddy Kong Racing that's just sort of swelled until it took over the entire idea.
Yeah, and you get this, a lot of times with development where you have this minuscule element that is clearly the favorite, like people keep coming back to it, like, oh, let's expand this. And before long, that becomes the entire project, and everything else is shunted by the wayside. You get this little golden nugget of an idea amidst everything else, and that is what you really want to plant. And
it feels a bit like all the Greg Mails games that slowly seeded more and more piracy. Until we just got a full-blown pirate game.
Right, yeah. I believe the technical term for that is edging. But you have to wonder, and we don't know anything about this, so this is just purely speculation on my part, but I have to wonder if Schuneman was thinking, I would really like to maybe explain in this game, because I don't know if it took place on Timber's Island or not. It starred Timber, so that is a logical assumption to make, but it could have very easily just taken place elsewhere in what we now know as the Rare Archipelago. But I wonder if he was thinking, hey, why are dinosaurs on Timber's Island? What if we could explain that? What if we explain that through time travel? So I don't know if this game was initially conceived as a prequel to Diddy Kong Racing that would explain why there are dinosaurs in the present day. I lean towards it maybe being a prequel to Diddy Kong Racing for one reason, and that is the through line, the one constant between all iterations of Dinosaur Planet, and that is the character Tricky. And when I say that Diddy Kong Racing is a story of failed spin-offs or false spin-offs that aren't really spin-offs but are portrayed as spin-offs, there is one character effectively, successfully spun out of Diddy Kong Racing, but it's none of the playable characters. It's not Bumper, it's not Drumstick, it's not even TT yet. It's the first boss of the game, Tricky, who we knew as a Triceratops in Diddy Kong Racing, which is not a character you would think, hey, let's really explore the backstory of this asshole who cheats. I mean, he's just a gruff dinosaur boss who then, warms up to you when you beat him. He says, "Well done, kid." But
all the boss characters in Diddy Kong Racing are fun, but it's, you put a list in front of me, it's not the one you'd pick out.
Yeah.
This is the kid that's going places.
Yeah. So I don't have any evidence to back this up, and Lee Schuneman is effectively a ghost online right now. Like, he's not really active on Twitter. He doesn't really do many interviews, but I have a suspicion that this game would have explored why there are dinos in Dino Domain. And the reason that Tricky, this boss character from Diddy Kong Racing, was in the game was that you meet him as a younger dinosaur in this early version of Dinosaur Planet where Timber travels through time, and Timber meets Tricky and befriends him and takes him back with him to the present, and he becomes this constant dinosaur companion to Timber throughout the time traveling adventure. I don't know. I don't have anything to go off of, but that seems like the most logical assumption to make. And that brings us to the long, sordid history of Tricky in Dinosaur Planet and Star Fox Adventures, and why DK Vine, we're the only ones who die on this dinosaur. I was going to say horse, but I guess it would be dinosaur. We're the only ones who ultimately consider him to be the same character as Tricky in Diddy Kong Racing. And this is also the part of the episode where we explain why a noted Donkey Kong enthusiast website like DK Vine talks about Star Fox so much, but only 3 Star Fox games, not the ones that people really like. No, we talk about the controversial ones in the middle. All right, Cameron. So, unambiguously, Tricky initially was the same Tricky from Diddy Kong Racing. Things got murkier as development shifted from Dinosaur Planet to Star Fox Adventures, yes. But originally, they were supposed to be one and the same without question, without debate. And this all started, and it's hard for me to remember the complete history of Dinosaur Planet being rumored, because you hear things about, is Rare working on a new game? They've registered the trademark Dinosaur Planet. Oh, they're making a game about dinosaurs. And then when Rare actually cops to it and reveals info, it's nebulous. It's all sort of muddy, especially because Dinosaur Planet, while I was very much looking forward to it, it wasn't my area of expertise on vintage DK Vine. I was more focused on, of course, Donkey Kong 64 and then Banjo-Tooie and Conker's eventual game. So Dinosaur Planet was also this, that's also going to be really cool, but I really can't devote too much brain power towards it because I have to keep up on the Banjo-Tooie hype. I have to focus on this, so I will leave that to other editors to be more enthusiastic about. So I can't really remember the full details about how Rare revealed Dinosaur Planet, when it was officially revealed, when it was shown off. I know E3 2000 played a role, but I can't remember how much we knew before then and what the details were.
I certainly can't speak to this because in these years, I still like wasn't really online at all, and I feel like Dinosaur Planet was one of those games that, like, the marketing rollout hadn't hit yet before it was converted over to Star Fox Adventures. So unless you were very in the know about it, it probably wasn't. It probably wasn't on your radar. It certainly wasn't on mine.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the first games that you really had an inside track on if you were online, as much as I was around this time. Because, you know, you would have magazines report on things, you would have magazines report on rumors, like Donkey Kong 64 was just this rumored game that every video game magazine, sans Nintendo Power, basically said, yeah, it's happening, of course it's happening. And
there were magazine articles about Dinosaur Planet, but it wasn't, say, you walk into a store and find a Nintendo Power with Saber on the cover as a full page artwork.
Yeah. And this was the point where once I discovered Rare's website, I basically stopped reading all video game magazines because I sort of had, you know, the source, the fountainhead of all information pertaining to Rare. And I think what really sold me was when Lee basically said that Donkey Kong 64 was happening in 1998 before it was officially announced, you know, on New Year's. And I was like, all right, well, this is all I need then, because I'm getting actual information from L. Loveday from off of Rare. I don't need to, you know, sort of read the tarot cards of other video game magazines when I'm speaking to the Oracle himself. But yeah, Dinosaur Planet was a game that was definitely heavily rumored once the name was out there. And other Rare games sort of had this pattern where we would know about the name before we would know about anything else. Grabbed by the Ghoulies, Cameo. I remember Cameo. We thought Cameo might be a game starring a bunch of, like, other Rare characters, like B-listers and C-listers and D-listers, because the name Cameo implied, like, oh, there's going to be a bunch of cameos in this game. And so DK Vine was all about that until we found out it was just about Fairy. But, you know, we knew about the names before we knew anything about the games. And the connection between Dinosaur Planet and the DKU was really first fomented by Lee Loveday in Scribes when he would put a render of Tricky from Diddy Kong Racing at the top of the letter column for many months. And actually, I'd completely forgotten about the context behind this. I remember the render. It's the render where Tricky is sort of facing ass first with his head slightly tilted towards you, the viewer. And I remember this render because we did not know where this render came from because we hadn't seen it as a contemporary render of Diddy Kong Racing. And
a lot of Diddy Kong Racing, like, artwork is, like, as with a lot of, like, things from this era, like, Rare would make, honestly, way more promotional renders than they really needed to, and there'd always be, like, a handful from each of their games that would show up, like, one very specific place and never again.
Right, and there's still renders that we haven't seen to this day, and it's really frustrating because we really want high-res versions of everything, and it's why a Rare art book is probably our most desired, a Rare art book / history book is our most desired publication we could get from Rare, aside from a third Sea of Thieves novel, of course. But Rare Treasures, which was announced by Dark Horse back in 2017, and then there was just no follow-up on. Just like, oh, come on, what happened there? But anyway, I digress. We hadn't seen this render of Tricky before. I'm sure it's from Diddy Kong Racing, but because we hadn't seen it, we thought, oh my god, is this a render from ... Dinosaur Planet? And then Lee was infamous for using alt text on all of his renders and images on Rare's classic website, Rareware. And so you hovered over this Tricky render at the top of Scribes, and the alt text you would get would say, Planet? What planet? I'm from DKR, mate. Ah, so it really did sort of set the stage for us thinking, oh my god, is Tricky in Dinosaur Planet? And of course he was. He was. So as Dinosaur Planet...
Just not looking like this.
No. As Dinosaur Planet sort of got unveiled and we saw what Tricky looked like in Dinosaur Planet pre-Star Fox Adventures, with Saber as his bipedal companion, it was clear that Tricky was far younger than he was in Diddy Kong Racing, and we were like, oh my god, Dinosaur Planet is a prequel to Diddy Kong Racing. It takes place a long time ago in a, if not galaxy far, far away, then a solar system far, far away. And so that was just like catnip to us, that, oh my god, we're getting a prequel to the DKU that really explains where the dinosaurs come from. You know, maybe the dinosaurs in Diddy Kong Racing, the dinosaurs that we would eventually see in Banjo-Tooie, you know, and of course Conker's Bad Fur Day. But it was exciting, and we really, of course, clung to this idea that this was the same Tricky. And then after it became Star Fox Adventures, there was a bit of debate about whether or not it was the same Tricky. And early on, it seemed like Lee disconfirmed or attempted to disconfirm that it was the same Tricky in a reply to DK Vine co-founder Chad in Scribes. And it was one of those nebulous statements that can be read a dozen different ways depending on what you bring into it, what you want to believe. And
it should be said, like, Lee was relaying a response from somebody else as well, so there's like an extra layer of like division going on here,
which we'll get into in just a bit here. I liken it to the same statement as Diddy Kong being Donkey Kong's nephew wannabe, where that such a simple statement can be read so many different ways depending on what you want to believe. Is Diddy Kong biologically Donkey Kong's nephew? Is he a nephew in spirit only? Like, as I saw related on Twitter, Jesse Pinkman is to Walter White, which I can't unsee now. And so we still have this debate, 23 years later in the fandom about how Diddy Kong relates to Donkey Kong. The Idaho crew is always on me about this, even though I think we effectively believe the same thing. It just, how we parse it out is a little bit different in the nuance. But anyway, I very much saw this at the time as a certain point of view thing. And I'm sure with the buyout looming behind the scenes, there was a desire not to say, yes, this potential rare intellectual property is the exact same as this character who will surely remain Nintendo's intellectual property. The time that we asked this, not knowing what was happening behind the scenes and what Rare was sort of facing down future prospects for, it makes complete sense that we would get this answer.
And it's a valid question because, like, we know in context why he's named Tricky in Diddy Kong Racing. It's because he's a racing opponent that cheats.
And he's a Triceratops, and we need alliteration of some sort. But
what does that have to do with him being a cute little child companion in a Zelda-like?
Yeah, that's always been my go-to. But rebuttal to all the people who say they're different characters is, what damn sense does the name Tricky make out of the context of him being the Diddy Kong Racing dinosaur?
I guess you could argue he does tricks like a dog, but that's not how you'd arrive at that organically as the same name.
No, and they even put a lampshade on it in Star Fox Adventures where Fox hears Tricky's name for the first time and he says, "Nice name." As if that makes it okay that his name makes no sense out of the context of being a Diddy Kong Racing boss. But okay. All right. They made an effort. That's more than most people do. But anyway, this is the exact statement that what was given in Scribes to tell us, is Tricky in Dinosaur Planet the same character, or Star Fox Adventures the same character as in Diddy Kong Racing? I guess this was pre-Star Fox Adventures then, because it says right then, answers from Dino Planet's Man in the Know are called for, I think.
This would have been, I think this was from April of 2000.
Okay,
so like before we were publicly aware of the...
I think we were. I think Rare did like announce, like did a
June of 2000.
June of 2000. Okay, so this would be after E3 of that year then, I think.
But before we were publicly told that the game was being retooled behind the scenes.
Right. So, okay, so because I think Rare did a slow reveal for Dinosaur Planet stuff, but it had its big coming out party at E3 2000. And so then that sort of really upped the stakes because, yeah, Tricky did look different. He was a little kid and we wanted to know. And so, of course, as we did at DK Vine, we shot off a letter to scribes. Like before we could at somebody on Twitter, that was the quickest and simplest way of garnering communication with Rare. And so Lee said, right then, answers from Dino Planet's Man in the Know are called for, I think. So we don't know who the Man in the Know is, if this was Lee Schuneman or this was somebody else on the staff. They were very...
I feel like Lee Schuneman or Kev Bayless would be the likely answers, but I can't say for certain.
Yeah, Lee Loveday was always very careful about pulling in other people at Rare who might want a degree of anonymity, back during this era when being online was considered this dodgy thing and, not social media wasn't a thing and we didn't live our entire lives in the public view. But anyway, this is the quote we got from this anonymous Dinosaur Planet staffer. Okay, this is about Tricky. All right. In a way, no. So already we got this very like have your cake and eat it too statement. In a way, no. When the game started development, he was the same dinosaur, but as it has now changed completely from the original design, we've kept his name, but essentially, he's a different dinosaur. So, we had this statement, Cameron, that would have immediately torpedoed any notion of it being DKU, of Dinosaur Planet still retaining that connection to Diddy Kong Racing. But because it was so...
We're taking seeing a lot of wiggle room in that word essentially.
And in a way, and essentially, yeah. And when I was trying to find this quote when I was doing the show notes, you eventually found it for me, Cameron, so thank you. But I just remembered the essentially, so I kept plugging that in as a Google search term. Tricky, Dinosaur Planet, scribes, essentially. And it kept bringing back results minus essentially. I was like, no, include essentially. But I couldn't find it. But anyway.
It's essential.
Yeah. So, as you said, wiggle room. And we were like, well, he started off as the same dinosaur, but essentially he's different. You could just say, design-wise, he's essentially different. But character-wise, the soul of the character is still in there.
And character designs are always malleable, so I can see why that necessarily didn't matter. I mean, we've had Diddy with a different amount of fingers and toes for more than 20 years, I think, at this point.
Different eye colors, too. 3 different eye colors throughout the years. Yeah, I think that we saw it more from the dev standpoint of, well, no, they're different, but it's still Tricky, the dinosaur. So we basically ran with it. We're like, close enough. We can't dismiss this outright, so we are going to continue operating under the assumption that it is the same Tricky from Diddy Kong Racing, just as a child. Because, that render of Tricky at the top of Scribes, what was Diddy Kong Racing Tricky? So we thought maybe at one time he was adult Tricky, which I think Kev Bayless has shown us, or from his statements, we can sort of piece together that no, he was always a little kid Tricky in this game. But anyway,
I mean, also for DK Vine purposes, like, you don't want to be told a thing that, like, inclines you to stop talking about a game on DK Vine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like all those people who argue with us that, no, Greg Mayles isn't technically sailing as Captain Blackeye in Sea of Thieves. And we're like, shut up.
No, they don't call the fish Royston in Yooka-Laylee.
Yeah, shut up. Why do you want us to talk about less games? It's so limiting. Anyway, there's also a second statement to one of Chad's questions here, where it just clarifies, Dinosaur Planet has no links whatsoever to Diddy Kong Racing. The to be continued may be answered sometime in the future. Still waiting. Waiting on that one.
Still waiting.
I mean, I guess you could say Diddy Kong Racing DS counts, but then it just provides its own sort of cliffhanger, sort of. So anyway, so this is what we had to go off of. And no more was spoken of this for several years, like upwards of 5 years. And so DK Vine, we experienced the buyout. We experienced the change of Star Fox Adventures, but we still argued that this was the same Tricky, and people disagreed with us. There are still people on the DK Vine forum and in the community who say, no, they're not the same Tricky. Didn't you read that statement? It said, in a way, no. Essentially, he's a different dinosaur. What do you not understand about that? But anyway, I think Mario Wiki runs with that because, Mario Wiki doesn't want to have the headache of having to cover Star Fox Adventures and Star Fox Assault. So they're like, yeah, they're different. I can understand from that point of view, like, when does a thing stop becoming linked to a thing? It's the same reason we came up with the Waluigi rule, so we wouldn't have to talk about games that were completely unrelated to the DKU and sort of this tapestry that is Rare. Because yeah, Fire Emblem for the GBA is a very fun game, but what the hell does that have to do with anything other than Roy first appeared in the West in Super Smash Bros. Melee? So we have to come up with this kind of rule for cameo games, and it makes sense. And I understand why Mario Wiki would not want to cover Star Fox Adventures. But anyway, August was at 30th, 2007. There was a new edition of Scribes. And this is, again, 5 years into the buyout era, 5 years into them being with Xbox, well into the Xbox 360 era. And they got another question about Tricky. Somehow. And this just shows how we talked about in the last episode how careful Rare was on their website not to invoke Nintendo right around the time of the buyout. But 5 years in, Lee was just like, yeah, I'll answer questions about Tricky from Star Fox Adventures, whatever the fuck, I don't care. So, we're 5 years into this, and we kind of know, like, there are no hard rules pertaining to this. We just can't have copyrighted images on our website. Anyway, Lee said, the Tricky question initially seems a bit, well, trickier, because he appeared in DKR before Star Fox Adventures, assuming it's the same character, which it supposedly is, or was originally intended to be. But at the end of the day, Nintendo owns SFA outright, and Tricky also turned up in the otherwise rare-free zone of Star Fox Assault, along with Crystal, which would more or less confirm it. So the question was, does Rare own Tricky? Who owns Tricky? And Lee came down on the side that I guess Nintendo owns Tricky, but it might be the same character as Diddy Kong Racing. Which, so 5 years in, the stance is obviously softening towards our viewpoint. And maybe that's just because we wore people down. I don't know.
And it kind of seems like the answer might be like, maybe Rare could legally use the DKR version of Tricky, but we're probably never going to, just to not even have to address that question.
Yeah, I've talked about this before, but when I got to meet a bunch of people at Rare for the first time in person at E3 2015, and I got to chat with somebody who worked on Dinosaur Planet / Star Fox Adventures. And we were talking about, like, the rights to who owns what, and he basically said, yeah, nobody really knows. When it comes to characters like Tricky, they don't know, and it's really not a hornet's nest they'd like to poke. Nintendo's used it, so Nintendo probably has rights. Basically, don't look for Rare or Xbox to ever try to resurrect the character of Tricky as he appeared in Diddy Kong Racing without Nintendo's tacit endorsement or, oversight. So, I think basically they crunched Tricky. Like, you could make the legal argument that they are separate characters, but at the end of the day, nobody's going to do that because who the fuck cares except us? So, yeah, Nintendo got him. Nintendo got him in the divorce. So anyway, flash forward to July 4th, 2012. Another 5 years. And DK Vine's Twitter account, I think this was Jeff.
Yeah, this was in a time when we had like rotating staff or basically everybody chipped in a little bit on all forms of social media before we kind of like delegated, like, no, this person is running Facebook, I'm running the Tumblr.
Yeah.
Chad was the steward of the Twitter until you took over, that sort of thing.
Right. I was in charge of Facebook for the longest time, and then I took over both Facebook and Twitter. And it makes more sense because it was ungainly to have so many cooks in the kitchen, essentially. And
because there's no acknowledgement of like which voice is being spoken with, it can come off a little bit contradictory.
And it did. So we cleaned that up. But yeah, this was when everybody had free reign because we didn't care about Twitter because what the fuck was Twitter? So Jeff tweeted on July 4th, 2012, "It's Independence Day. That's right, the day that Dino Domain declared its sovereignty from Dinosaur Planet." Or something. To which Rare retweeted. Fact. Fact. Period.
We will grasp at the smallest straws we can get, but we ran with this one.
Oh, yeah. And I think that really shows how we wore them down over the course of a decade or 12 years. To the point where nobody cares anymore. We effectively won the argument, I would say. And look, like, I understand, like, if we sat down again with Kev Bayless or somebody else who worked on Star Fox Adventures, they would probably argue this point. It's like the Star Fox Adventures devs never acknowledging that the shopkeeper is named Shabunga.
Which we know was appropriated from, like, a character that got cut in development, but somehow made it into a player's guide?
Yes, Nintendo Power and their player's guide ran with the name Shabunga. And let's face it, Shabunga is such a fun name.
It's such a cool name. Why waste it?
Waste it?
Yeah, put it on the shopkeeper.
And yeah, we don't know how they reappropriated it. It's like the early Star Wars expanded universe, like reappropriating several names from Lucas's like rough drafts of Star Wars. And, I think it works and it's effectively canon because at the end of the day, Nintendo does own the rights to Star Fox Adventure. So if they want to say he's Shabunga, who are we to disagree? But you talk to anybody who worked on the game and they would say he's the shopkeeper. He doesn't have a name. And we're like, well, okay, but his name is Shabunga. Do you even Star Fox Adventures, bro? So I'm sure most on the team, like I said, including Kev, would be surprised by our assertion that Diddy Kong Racing Tricky is the same character as Star Fox Adventures Tricky, and that Star Fox is effectively a prequel to Donkey Kong. But it's one of those things like Chris Seaver not believing that Conker is part of the shared universe of Donkey Kong or Banjo, or Greg Mayles maybe not believing that Banjo-Kazooie is exactly the same shared universe as Donkey Kong. The understandings of the creators on the team have effectively been overruled by either the broader studio and statements they've made, or just the continuity presented in the game.
I mean, it happens when these intellectual properties are bigger than any one person.
Right, and while we respect Word of God on DK Vine to a certain extent, we do have to draw the line where we get these contradictory statements. And yeah, like, I respect the hell out of Chris Seaver and Greg Mayles and respect the vision they had for these, but
but also, Diddy Kong Racing doesn't not exist because you said something like that.
Right, I've got paragraphs of text that say Conker is friends with Diddy Kong. So, what's more fun? You know, at the end of the day, What are we going to have more fun with? Just like not covering Conker at all and pretending like there was some sort of multiversal crossover in Diddy Kong Racing, or looking at the instruction manual and seeing what it has to say on the matter, which is a whole hell of a lot more fun. Hey, Rare Archipelago, this is great. So, yeah, you do run up, against this at some point. And like I said, we respect the creators, we respect their point of view, but they are essentially working in a larger tapestry. They are but one thread in the larger quilt. So, they're the same dinosaur. I think Rare broadly agrees with that now. They don't disagree with it. And you saw how Lee Loveday was hedging his bets not 5 years after Star Fox Adventures came out. Yeah, they're the same dinosaur, I guess. I mean, maybe. Who knows? And look, we're not going to get into Star Fox Assault too much in discussion in this Spotlight series, but Star Fox Assault honestly sets up the Diddy Kong Racing Tricky so beautifully, so perfectly, as such this weird middle ground between Star Fox Adventures and Diddy Kong Racing, that it's too perfect to say that no, they're not the same dinosaur. And I know, like, Star Fox Adventures and Assault Tricky are not portrayed as Triceratops, which Diddy Kong Racing Tricky was, but some Earthwalkers are Triceratops. So, he's an Earthwalker.
Yeah, it seems to be exclusively the royal family that doesn't have the horns.
Yeah,
in front.
Yeah, you look at the Earthwalkers, and they are made up of. I'm not a dinosaur guy, Cameron, so I can't say. It's what kind of dinosaurs are they? Like ceratopsians? Is that how you pronounce it?
You're asking the wrong person, but I'm sure somebody is screaming at us listening to this episode.
Yeah. Effectively, whatever Earthwalkers are, maybe it's Styracosaurus.
Like that's what I want to say, like Tricky specifically might be, but I don't know what the umbrella term for
yeah
the type that these are, other than I'm just gonna cut myself off right here before I say something that I need to correct.
I just looked it up. So Ceratopsia, and I'm probably bungling the pronunciation of that because I'm not a paleontologist.
Shabungling.
That is the class of dinosaurs that Earthwalkers are. And the king Earthwalker and Prince Tricky would seem to be the Styracosauruses. They have a nose horn, but they don't have the horns above their eyes. But the queen Earthwalker would be a Protoceratops, because she doesn't have any horns. And that the standard run-of-the-mill Earthwalkers are Triceratops.
I would imagine they weren't so concerned with the dissecting the biology of how this works, and more just what makes a distinctive character design. Because of course the warrior class Earthwalkers would be the ones with the horns in front.
Right. So, they're all interbreeded Earthwalkers. So, maybe Tricky evolved into a Triceratops looking motherfucker. But he's not a Triceratops. He's an alien extraterrestrial saurian. So he just so happens to resemble a Triceratops.
This is also why, nobody from Star Fox Adventures or Diddy Kong Racing is bound by the increasingly updating fossil record.
Exactly.
They can, do dinosaurs have feathers? Do they not? Doesn't matter. Diddy Kong Racing's locked in time because they're aliens now, apparently.
Yeah, because Jeff made it canon for us on July 4th, 2012, that all the dinosaurs in Diddy Kong Racing, and by process of association, Banjo-Tooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day, all those dinosaurs are extraterrestrials from Dinosaur Planet, also known as Sauria. So, yeah! High five!
Yay.
So that is why DK Vine covers Star Fox Adventures, because it is a Diddy Kong Racing spinoff. It started off a blatant Diddy Kong Racing spinoff, and over time that was sort of whittled away. But Tricky is still in all versions of the game, and God bless them for never changing his name. I mean, really, seriously, thank you for sticking with that ludicrous, means nothing name through all 3 versions of the game, because without it, we wouldn't be talking about it here on the conversation today.
Yeah, nice name indeed.
All right, so let's talk about the hype for Dinosaur Planet just a little bit. Now, I admittedly was not as focused, as I said, on Dinosaur Planet. It was parallel to the hype for 2E and Conquer. I wasn't as completely invested in this game initially as other DK Vine editors. And now Star Fox Adventures is in my top 10 games of all time, which is something that, as much as I love them, 2E and Conquer's Bad Fur Day do not share. Like Star Fox Adventures is in my top 10 of all time. And Bad Fur Day and 2E would probably be in my top 20 for sure, but they're not in the wholly upper echelon.
I would probably, in my case, put 2E above Adventures, but it's not worlds apart.
Right. Right. So, even though I could not devote as much mental bandwidth to concentrate on Dinosaur Planet, because you have to understand, back in the day, back in the middle, smack dab in the middle of the spin-off era for the DKU, we had a bounty of stuff. We had Donkey Kong stuff to look forward to. Banjo and Conquer were both active, vibrant franchises. And so you throw in a 4th thing there, and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, give me as much as I want, but it's not going to be something that I can just be as equally excited about as everything else.
And it's even worse if you're a general Rare fan, because you've got Perfect Dark mixed in there.
Oh yeah, look over at what RareNet was doing at this time. They were only talking about Perfect Dark, and they were just throwing lip surface into everything else. So it just depended on how you were wired and what you're looking forward to. Obviously, with the DKU connection, I was looking forward to Dinosaur Planet, but I kind of liken it to how Marvel Studios fans, Marvel Cinematic Universe fans must feel these days, where you've got, 8 Disney Plus series in the works and 30 movies, and then you've got maybe the cameo appearances in the Sony Spider-Man universe, and you just can't be excited for everything. You're broadly looking forward to everything. Oh, that might be cool, but yeah, something like Werewolf by Night, it's I'm looking forward to it, but I'm not going to spend hours upon every day thinking about what it might be.
And some things they'll only hit you when the game is out and in your hands, or
exactly.
You've that point in the marketing cycle where you know everything that you need to know.
Yeah, but I will say this. It quickly became, I think, the most hyped game for the rest of the DK Vine staff, sans me. I know Chad and Ben were all about this, and, dinosaurs weren't particularly in the zeitgeist at the turn of the millennium. That was mostly an early 90s craze.
I feel like there was a hard downward turn after Lost World came out.
Yeah,
I feel like that was where the line on the graph started to go down.
Yeah, early 90s, everything was about dinosaurs. People point to Jurassic Park, but it was in the air before Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was a movie that just hit the zeitgeist at the right time. But you look at Super Mario World, Yoshi, and then the cartoon that came with it was all about this prehistoric land and really played that up more than anything. And the Super Mario Brothers movie, as a result, also focused on
Dinotopia, I think, started in 1992.
Yeah. Walk the Dinosaur.
Turok.
Yeah.
A bit later.
The Flintstones live action movie, which didn't exceed as much at the box office as people thought it would compared to The Lion King, which I think demolished it. But
there were certainly dinosaurs in the air, but I do think Jurassic Park is the point where, like, it did spawn a lot of, like, imitators trying to ride the train.
Yeah.
But it was definitely just in the air in general.
Yeah, and as the 90s wore on, you would see less and less dinosaur stuff because it kind of just fell out of being, like, the hot thing at the moment. So while Dinosaur Planet wasn't really, like, plugged in as far as that goes, I would argue that it did really tie into the mysticism of fantasy in space, which, the Star Wars prequels were the big thing at this time, 1999 into 2000. So it was kind of like Rare's take on that. So dinosaur dressing aside, it was kind of hitting at this moment where that was a popular notion of, like, fantasy, but in space. And, that's what Dinosaur Planet promised to be because, aside from it being what we viewed as a tricky spin-off, it was filling this new genre niche within the DKU. I've always said that Donkey Kong is sort of this rollicking, old-timey serial adventure, sort of like Indiana Jones, a National Geographic special that you can sort of take part in and explore exotic locales, ancient temples. And Banjo-Kazooie is more of a fractured fairy tale, sort of Brothers Grimm by way of late 90s, just cynical culture. And then Conker was ultimately a riff on Western animation. So Dinosaur Planet would sort of be this whole new vibe of fantasy in the sci-fi world with, mystics and wizards and magic. And yeah, it was just something completely fresh than we were getting from the rest of the DKU. And it, would sort of take itself a little bit more seriously, where Donkey Kong and Banjo and Conker all acknowledge that they're video game characters and sort of put a lampshade on everything and take the piss out of everything, and they don't let really many serious moments land. Dinosaur Planet would play it straight and just be fantasy sci-fi, which I think really excited a lot of the DK Vine staff who were going through that, growing up phase of being a teenager, and they wanted, more adult fare, I guess, to say like, hey, what I'm into isn't just kiddie. We've also got this. Isn't just for kids over here.
And not to say, as we learned, like, Dinosaur Planet didn't have, like, plenty of humor in it, but it's not really something that's conveyed in screenshots in a magazine.
Right.
Or online.
It's funny, though, Cameron, because as the hype for Dinosaur Planet started, and we started to see the characters, sketches of the characters, and then eventually screenshots, comparisons were starting to be made. And often during this time period, comparisons would be made between what Rare was doing and what Nintendo had done. You couldn't help it. It was just something that people did.
Yeah, it was generally, like, understood, like, Rare would release a game and the comparisons would immediately be made to something Nintendo had released, like, not long prior. And often it was a pretty justified comparison because, like, we learned that very much was the case for Banjo-Kazooie. Mario 64 came out and completely overturned the table on that game's design.
Yeah, but the way people framed it was, this game is just a clone of that game. Clone was a word that was used frequently in those days. Like, Banjo-Kazooie doesn't have its own merits. It's just Super Mario 64 with a bear and a bird.
Clone was also something that I feel like got a lot of use in the 90s and early 2000s in a time where, like, words that defined genres hadn't really cemented themselves.
Yeah.
Like, you still had, like, it's not a first-person shooter, it's a Doom clone.
Yeah, I don't even know, like, if terms like Metroidvania were in use then, or, you would just use, it's a blank clone. It's a blank clone. Like, we didn't have structured genres that maybe one game originated or spawned all these other
and like
games,
even Metroidvania is kind of this weird artifact of like that was coined to describe a specific type of Castlevania game.
Yeah.
Because like there are the Castlevanias where like there are, you know, the ones like pre-search action style and the ones after that. And I think it just kind of took a foothold. But yeah, there's I don't know if we like there was no way to describe, I think, what Dinosaur Planet was in these days other than like Zelda like.
Well, that's the thing, because it was being bandied about as a, you know, Rare's take on a Zelda-like game, especially in light of Ocarina of Time and the still as to be released Majora's Mask. And that's all well and good, but comparisons were being made as far as art direction goes to another Nintendo franchise that at the time seemed to have nothing to do with Dinosaur Planet. Of course, I'm referring to Star Fox. Because I remember, I was there, people were saying way back, Saber looks like Fox McCloud. And I didn't really see it. I was like, no, like, Saber's this cat dude. You know, Saber's this, like, cat humanoid. This doesn't even look like a fox. Like, maybe, if you squint, you could say, yeah, they would fit right at home in a Star Fox game. If
a big-headed furry animal who walking on two legs, who, you know, also has like a similar color scheme.
Yeah. You had people. It's less prominent these days. I mean, you still run into it, but back then there was this, I think, desperate desire not to be seen as, well, I'm not a furry. Right, let's assign like I
don't feel like that was really in the zeitgeist.
I think it was around the time of Star Fox Adventure's release. I don't know if it was.
I mean, around the time of Dinosaur Planet, I don't think it.
Yeah,
really was.
But I mean, that's only, you know, 2 years.
I think Star Fox Adventures activated a lot of people, is what I would say.
It might have awakened some sensations in some people and some desires they didn't know they had buried deep within them. But I mean, I think while today, you know, people, at least, you know, here at DK Mine, we are a lot more broadly accepting of whatever people are into, so long as you're not hurting anybody. Yeah, if you're into that, that's awesome. But there was this desire not to be seen as that. And I remember, like, even back then, like, with this very, like, chaste version of Crystal and Dinosaur Planet, people were just, like, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but it was just, there was just something there, like, But there was this comparison being made with Star Fox, and I didn't really see it. You know, I thought it was, like, it's whatever. Yeah, they both take place nebulously in space, although most of this game seems to take place on an alien planet, so they're not really traveling through space. So I think you're just kind of grasping at straws, trying to create this connection of Rare ripping off Nintendo that isn't really there. And that's all well and good, and I would stand by that viewpoint, but apparently somebody at Nintendo did think that there was some sort of visual similarity between Dinosaur Planet and Star Fox. And not just somebody at Nintendo, Shigeru Miyamoto himself noted the comparison publicly as early as E3 2000, where the game was, you know, shown off. And this was still the N64 version of Dinosaur Planet, keep in mind. This is at least publicly where the idea to turn the game into a Star Fox game apparently started to take shape. So according to an interview with IGN at E3 2000, Miyamoto had this to say about Dinosaur Planet. "It looks really nice, doesn't it? I wish they would use Star Fox characters so that they could use the title Star Fox Adventures," he said jokingly. "Maybe I should call the team and talk about it." So, you know, after the fact, it was like, all right, what's up? Well, what was up at E3 2000? Is this a situation like E397 where Rare shows off Pro M64 behind the scenes to Nintendo, and then conversations start to take place about turning it into Diddy Kong Racing. Was this happening to Dinosaur Planet then, or was it earlier?
So, kind of seems pretty definitive at this point that this was like a winking, like nudge comment. It seems like this might have been in the works for a while, especially given the date of the Dinosaur Planet ROM that leaked. In 2002, there was an interview conducted with the Takaya Imamura, who was kind of a really large guiding hand behind the scenes for Star Fox, it turns out, when he was with Nintendo. He left Nintendo just within the last few years. And some years prior, he, along with the programmer, I apologize if I mangle this name, Kazuaki Morita, they were in talks about wanting to do a sequel to Star Fox 64. Imamura specifically had a lot of attachment to Star Fox's like characters and world, and I think like it kind of phrased this as like he specifically went to Miyamoto and was like, "Hey, let me do this. I wanna take charge on the next one." And Miyamoto suggested, instead of a shooter, what if you made an adventure-style game? So there was, like, completely unrelated to Dinosaur Planet, there was internal interest at Nintendo to make an on-foot Star Fox game. And according to Imamura, the initial concept, like, they were kicking around was a third-person on-foot shooter, quote, where you'd get to mow down tons of enemies. Fox would have a gun, his blaster, rather than the staff at this point. But as they were like considering whether or not to move forward with this project, like things were gearing up for the GameCube at this point. Their prospective internal team at Nintendo to work on this Star Fox sequel was being pulled away to their higher priority projects like Mario and Zelda. And, Dinosaur Planet's development was had gotten so long in the tooth at this point that like the N64 is about to be out of the conversation. As impressive as Dinosaur Planet looks, like the things are moving on to the GameCube. So, again, according to this interview, shortly after things wrapped on Majora's Mask, Miyamoto, in his role as producer, came to them and suggested that they migrate both projects over to the GameCube and combine them.
Yeah. So, Miyamoto was just being obviously cheeky in that interview at E3 2000. And, at the time, when we saw that interview, we thought he was just being a jackass. Like we had zero like good faith readings of that because we thought he was just being dismissive, and we said, "Oh, it looks like Star Fox, those hacks at Rare."
This is also just like how a bunch of Nintendo interviews in general go, where it'll be like somebody says something, laughs.
Right, and you don't get any nuance in these text interviews. How much pain did IGN cause us throughout the 2000s by linking to or posting interviews stripped of context or just completely mistranslated, and put all these notions in our head of like the sinister machinations at Nintendo towards everything we loved, which wasn't the case at all. And the Stampers were clearly on board with this idea of making it Star Fox Adventures because, hey, as Dinosaur Planet, they might sell copies, they might move that game, but if you attach it to a known IP, all of a sudden their chance of selling over 1 million copies dramatically ticks up. And
the ROM we got for this was dated December 1st of 2000, so it seems like work started pretty immediately on this conversion.
Yeah. And like, even if they were in talks before E3 happened, obviously they weren't ready to show off any like Star Fox Adventures game version of Dinosaur Planet at E3, so they just showed off Dinosaur Planet as it currently existed, but this was already, in the works.
Yeah, again, like, did the talks start at that E3? I guess they could have, but I get the impression that this was being kicked around, especially if they were doing this right after Majora's Mask wrapped.
Yeah.
Like, the phrasing is ambiguous. It's like after work on Majora's Mask ended, which would have been well in advance of it releasing, which was April of that year. But bottom line, like, no, this wasn't just like a light bulb went off in the middle of this interview.
No, but that's certainly how, especially like, so for the rest of 2000, we did not know what was happening behind the scenes and that it was actually becoming Star Fox Adventures. We just thought Miyamoto was casting shade on Rare and the Dinosaur Planet team, which we weren't happy about. But we didn't know that it was in the works, and that Rare was enthusiastically embracing this. At least the Stampers were. I'm sure there were people on the Dinosaur Planet team who initially weren't happy about having to change their game and their ideas for it.
I mean, like, taking a step back, this is just repeating what they did with Diddy Kong Racing.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, on paper.
Yeah, 5 years later, and they change another game they had in the works. And there were people in the Diddy Kong Racing team who weren't happy about it being changed from Pro-Am 64 to Diddy Kong Racing. I think Kev Bayless has said he didn't care because he created Diddy Kong and it was more spotlight for him, so whatever.
Dinosaur Planet has the rather significant factor Diddy Kong Racing didn't, in that it's a much more narrative-focused game.
Right, so they did have to excise quite a bit and make sure it was integrated into the world of Star Fox. And I, we'll get into it when we're actually talking about the game, but I think it was really creative and clever, everything they did to bring it in line with Star Fox while retaining retaining this essential elements of Dinosaur Planet. Losing a few good things, absolutely, but
you can definitely like spot the threads where like they had to kind of ram these two things together, but also it's simultaneously a lot more organic than it should really have ever been.
Sure. Absolutely. As I said, I don't mourn Dinosaur Planet, really, especially after seeing the ROM and seeing how close things did actually hew. But, if there were hurt feelings at the time, I'm sure the promise of a bigger payout when, the game is a Star Fox game soothed any hurt egos or...
Truth be told, I'm kind of mourning this never existed Star Fox third-person shooter.
Yeah, it sounds very similar, actually, to Star Fox Assault from Namco, which of course would follow Adventures, just at least as far as the general more arcade style action, whereas Star Fox Adventures is more of a Zelda-like game. But yeah, we didn't hear anything about this publicly until March of 2001, and that is when the French website Consoles France first reported...
Nice name.
First reported on the claim that it had been renamed Star Fox Adventures, at least according to insiders at Nintendo of Europe, which, wow, how leaky were they, Nintendo of Europe, at this time, where they just blatantly say, hey, that Dinosaur Planet game is becoming Star Fox Adventures. Why don't you report on that in your little website? Jesus Christ. You don't see this kind of leak often with Nintendo, really. Like, we get leaks here or there, but often it's not just this complete picture like, hey, it's going to be called this. You fucks.
It's only worse in the modern day because even if there is something like that, it's always peppered with stuff that just completely made up.
Yeah. So I remember when this story broke, and of course IGN picked up this story, as they often did, and I mean to this day, IGN will run stories that like smaller websites will run, and then, you know, oftentimes not even linked to the website in general. We've been the recipient of that treatment.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll report based on an angry forum post quoting something that a small website did.
Yes. So I remember, like, we read this on IGN, of course, because we weren't regular avid readers of Consoles France. And I remember the reaction was one of terror, one of anger, primarily at Shigeru Miyamoto, because he was the one who first publicly broached this idea. And also, you know, a bit of the same denialism that we would face with the Rare buyout rumors a year later. I remember thinking, like, oh, it might not happen. That might not be the case. This might be made up. It might be a fake rumor. Don't worry about it. And then there was also like, how dare Shigeru Miyamoto? Look, the anger we felt in Miyamoto at this time was unjustified and ugly. But I think back to the infamous Photoshop of him dressed as the Grim Reaper. Just...
I know it's in such bad taste, but he looks like he's so happy to be in that Grim Reaper costume.
I know, like, if that was the Reaper that came for me when my time on this planet is up, you know, I would be okay with that. I'd be like, yeah, let's go, man. That's awesome. This is awesome. No, but, you know, I think the problem was we did not have context for this, and, you know, from the outside looking in, and especially our young angry blood, we, especially some DK Vine editors, were super excited about Dinosaur Planet as it had been introduced to us, as it had been laid out. Like, the problem is we had already been given a taste of what to expect, similar to how we would be given a taste of Donkey Kong Racing at E3 2001. And from what we understood from this rumor in March of 2001, it was that it was taking this original Rare IP, one that spun out of Diddy Kong Racing, the holiest of the holies, and it was sacrificing it for a Nintendo IP. The anger didn't really pass for many in our community for many years. Even after Star Fox Adventures was released, even after the buyout, there are still people today who cannot get over losing Dinosaur Planet. I'm not one of them. I think I prefer Star Fox Adventures, gun to my head, but I get it. I do get it, especially because if we knew nothing about Dinosaur Planet before Star Fox Adventures was revealed, I think people would have been a lot more receptive. But the problem is you get them fantasizing, you get them speculating, you get them dreaming about this game with all of these characters and this new corner of the universe. And you're going to be so emotionally invested in that. And then to hear, oh, it's becoming a Star Fox game, that's just taking a hammer to everything. It's defacing the Mona Lisa. It's a crime against art. And, you know, I understand the anger. I'm not proud of it. I'm not trying to justify it, but it existed. It was there. And knowing the context we know now, hell, even knowing the context we knew in 2002, I think the anger should have gone away. But, you know, it obviously didn't. Especially the buyout didn't help matters, because the buyout created this stark, all of a sudden, like, you're on this side or you're on that side. Are you gonna blame Rare? Or are you gonna blame Nintendo? And if you're blaming Nintendo, then you're blaming them for everything. You're blaming them for ruining Dinosaur Planet. You're blaming them for this. You're blaming them for that. So it was just a congruence of events and timing that made this as contentious as it was for as long as it was in the community.
With the benefit of hindsight, like, I'd distill my opinion to at least a game came out.
Yeah, exactly. It's not Donkey Kong Racing, where we just didn't get anything out of it, including Saberman Stampede. And we got a complete game that was very fun, in my opinion, and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. And it made me care about Star Fox in a way that I would never care about Star Fox if I didn't have this game. So, do I mourn Dinosaur Planet? Not really. Do I think, oh, but if Dinosaur Planet had come out exactly as intended, then Rare would have retained all of the intellectual property for it. Yeah, but that doesn't mean we would have gotten anything for it. Like, would we have really gotten a Dinosaur Planet 2? We might see a ship set in Sea of Thieves. We might see references here or there. I don't know if we would have gotten a sequel during the Xbox years.
I lament some of the lost potential of Dinosaur Planet and the theoretical like Star Fox game that could have existed, or honestly probably would have just been canceled outright for lack of anybody to work on it.
Sure.
But I don't resent what we got. I love what we got.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with a lot of the ingredients that make up what we got that we wouldn't have gotten for not these circumstances.
I think my biggest regret, honestly, is that there was no time, because it was published the day before the buyout was announced. So I think
that's that's something that we know so much got ripped out of Dinosaur Planet prior to the final version of Star Fox Adventures, but how much of that can you attribute to converting the game to a Star Fox game, and how much of it can you attribute to just the ticking clock?
Yeah. But, because of that ticking clock, I think that my biggest regret is not that we lost out on Dinosaur Planet as originally envisioned, it was a Timber game, which would have been really cool, but we never even, saw a whiff of that. I think that my biggest regret is that Rare never had the time to do a sequel, to do a second Star Fox Adventures and continue to develop things on their terms. It's not Dinosaur Planet that I'm missing out on. It's the Star Fox Adventures brand that was never allowed to grow. Because at the time when they announced Star Fox Adventures, that it was kind of our thinking that, okay, this is like Donkey Kong Country was, Rare getting their hands on a Nintendo IP. Star Fox Adventures will be their brand, their series to do with as they will, and to develop and evolve their corner of the Star Fox world. So that's my biggest regret. It's not so much Dinosaur Planet.
It did set up this like weird paradigm of like, okay, we've completely changed the definition of what a Star Fox game is forever. Well, we out.
yeah, and that was kind of this weird place it did put the Star Fox franchise in. Ultimately, I think for the better. Many Star Fox fans would argue.
Oh yeah, it's created such an interesting new paradigm for Star Fox that I wouldn't have it any other way.
So let's talk about Star Fox just a little bit, Cameron. We've talked about Timber and Saber. But let's talk about Fox McCloud. Let's talk about Star Fox and Star Fox 64 and our relation with both before Star Fox Adventures. So, Star Fox, known as Starwing in PAL territories. God, I don't know how people in PAL territories deal with this, because it's been known as so many things. And I don't know the rights issues, why that is the case. Why it's been one thing for one game, one thing for another game.
Yeah, I'm to understand like it's like conflicting existing trademarks in Europe that they just wanted to sidestep entirely.
I know Star Fox is a Marvel character played by Harry Styles, but anyway, Star Fox was released here in North America in March of 1993. And for about a year and a half, some change, I thought it was the most impressive damned game I had ever seen. I was blown away when I saw the commercial advertising, and I thought my brain was playing tricks on me. I couldn't understand how a game could look like that, especially a game on a Super Nintendo. What was I seeing? It was like the 3D was popping out of my screen. And I had to try it. I was all about Star Fox. I was like, is this the game I've been waiting my entire life for? And so I finally rented it at Blockbuster, as our old-timey selves used to have to do. And that was probably not after release. It was definitely in that spring that I rented Star Fox Adventures, because I remember the trees were budding when I was being driven home with the game case, and was reading the instruction manual and reading about the Lilat system and everything, and put it in the Super Nintendo, played the first mission, and could not get into it for the life of me. I wanted to love it so badly, and everything felt just, I don't know, flat, lifeless. I think I can go back to it now and enjoy it, but and I had friends, contemporary friends who had rented it, and they got to Andros, or at least the big polygonal face man who's supposed to be on Andros. But for me, I think it was the on-rails shooty gameplay just didn't resonate with me at the time. And the game's graphics, while incredibly impressive with that Super FX chip and just something unlike anything we'd ever seen up until that point, it just made me feel cold and afraid. There was a lack of warmth in the game world that I felt, and it just put me off of it. And it was a shame because I really wanted to like it.
I wish this is the part where I could like step in and be the other side of this coin and say that like I adored Star Fox Super Nintendo and loved everything about it, but I'll be honest, Star Fox Super Nintendo, for whatever reason, maybe because I got into like gaming in general so late in the Super Nintendo's life, like it just, Star Fox Super Nintendo missed me completely, like not on my radar at all. Maybe save for like some of the pack-in flyer you would get with later Super Nintendo releases that had the giant Star Fox poster, which didn't really tell you anything about the game. It just looked really nice.
Yeah.
But Star Fox 64, that was my exposure to Star Fox, and I instantly fell in love with that.
Oh yeah, so Star Fox 64, known as Lilat Wars in PAL territories, that was awesome. I'm not gonna lie, I rented it. I got it for Christmas later that year, 1997. I have beat it multiple times across its multiple paths, both alone and playing with friends. Everything about that game clicked in a way that Star Fox for the Super Nintendo could not with me. And I think a large part of it was the voice acting, if I'm honest.
Oh, absolutely. I think that Star Fox 64 was the first game I had ever seen that had extensive voice acting, and essentially like felt like, oh, like I'm playing a movie.
Yeah, I would think that aside from Super Mario 64 and maybe Ocarina of Time, it's probably the non-rare game I have played the most on the N64.
It's one of the most like successful, at least from my experience, like attempts Nintendo has taken at a like score attack kind of game where you're designed to replay a relatively short game over and over and over again and do a little bit better each time, or take different paths. Like the replay value is not in like, it's not an 80-hour game with side missions. It's like the game doesn't save, and I remember that being a really big sticking point with me back in the day, but now I understand it's, oh yeah, you can do this campaign in a few hours or less once you're practiced enough with it.
And it never felt that boring to just restart it. Like, oh yeah, I'm taking this game to my friend's house. Oh, we have to play the first mission again. Oh well, which path are we going to take?
I cannot believe it is such a like feather in Star Fox 64's cap that there is so much talking in this game, and I am resentful of none of it. Like these lines are in my head. Like I've memorized basically every line in this game's script, and it's not for being irritated with it. It's because all of it is charming.
Yeah, I think the only line that irritates me is do a barrel roll, and that's just because it became one of those memes that even Nintendo adopted and used it, in promotion for Star Fox 64 3D, and it's like that's not even the best line in that mission. It's like there are so many better lines.
It's
more
not even the
memorable,
best. It's not the best line from Pepe either.
No.
He's got some really good ones.
Yeah, the game is so effortlessly quotable, and that's what you're gonna get hung up on. All right, but Star Fox 64. Aside from the voice acting, the gameplay was crisp. The worlds were colorful and vibrant, and I feel like
The gameplay definitely made it really hard for me to go back to Star Fox SNES when I eventually did, because Star Fox SNES, owing to when it came out, is a very choppy game. Star Fox 64 is a very smooth experience.
Yeah, and I would say that it's probably the closest, at least in that era, that Nintendo and Nintendo EAD ever came to capturing the spirit of Rare in both world building and humor. It feels very much like a Rare game at times.
Certainly of the time. I think there's an argument to be made nowadays, Splatoon fills that.
That's why I couched it with that. Yeah.
But certainly I think a sizable part of that is just how much of Star Fox in concept is rooted in appreciation of Western media, because it's the thing everybody knows about Star Fox is it's heavily drawing from Thunderbirds.
Yeah. And a little bit of Top Gun in there too.
And especially in Star Fox 64, it's it's pulling from a lot of media, and sometimes extremely blatantly. There's just a level that is an Independence Day parody.
Right. And yeah, the cast is great too. I would say Fox McCloud is a bit one note in it. He's just the bland hero, who wants to do right by his dead daddy.
But that's fine, because he's you, and you're not going to talk very much.
Right. The personalities of the rest of Team Star Fox, and then, oh my god, the shit-eating villains. It more than made up for any deficiencies in Fox's character. Pigma. I think of Pigma. I think of the train conductor.
Yeah, just completely incidental guys, like the Forever Train conductor, or the pirate on Zonas.
Right. Just they're all so memorable and evil. Like Pigma is just, I think, the darkest that Nintendo ever gets as far as the humor. Holy shit.
One of the most despicable Nintendo characters ever, but he's just so gloriously he's wearing that black hat and loves every second of it.
And that's what makes the game so great to me, because it's legitimately one of the only Nintendo games that makes me bust out laughing, because it catches me off guard. I'm not expecting them to go to the places they do in the dialogue. I'm like, oh, what? And that's the type of thing that Rare would usually do with me. But this is a Nintendo game through and through. Nintendo EAD, even. Holy crap. I vividly recall, while playing it, because I, played it quite a bit when I rented it, and played it even more after I got it for Christmas in '97. Once I'd beaten Diddy Kong Racing, went back to Star Fox 64, and I remember talking with my childhood friend Elliot, who I journeyed through every DKU game of that era with. I think up through Conker's Bad Fur Day we played together. But I remember talking about Star Fox with him, about how much fun it would be to get a sequel where you could do missions on foot. And, I guess that was just... that was a common thing that was being bandied about as far as Star Fox goes during that time. Wouldn't it be great if we would get another game, but you could get out of your vehicle and run around as the characters?
I feel like that's like revisionist history that hit after Star Fox Adventures, that like people didn't want an on-foot Star Fox game because
it was.
They absolutely did.
They absolutely did. From the fans to Nintendo themselves, we were all talking about it
as early as Star Fox 64's like multiplayer, because there was after a pretty arduous unlock process, you could have like death matches between characters on foot.
Yeah, so if you ever hear anybody saying nobody wanted Star Fox game out of the vehicle, you tell them to shut their fucking mouth. It is just complete revisionist history. They may have personally never wanted it. I would never say that everybody wanted it. But no,
because like no fandom is a hive mind. Everybody is an individual with different interests and wants.
Yeah, but I really wanted it because I was intrigued by the characters, and I was like, it'd be so much fun to actually get to control them. And
I feel like that's common in any game where you're controlling a character, but you're mostly seeing a vehicle.
Right.
Like, how many people have said, oh, they should make another F-Zero, and Captain Falcon should be a bounty hunter in like an open world, like GTA style situation.
I think having the character in Super Smash Brothers also helps like separate him, makes him a more actualized thing to people than just this like icon in the F-Zero character select.
Even though like Imamura gave a lot of these characters really fun backstories, not just Captain Falcon.
Right.
I'd say like Captain Falcon's like the Mario of F-Zero. You dig a little bit deeper, you're going to find some really fun, ridiculous things.
Unfortunately, Sakurai and his team never dug deeper for F-Zero in Smash because the Kingmaker has spoken, Cameron, and people only know Captain Falcon.
But anyway.
Yeah. It's funny because I remember like that very year after Diddy Kong Racing came out, or after Mario Kart 64 came out, earlier that year after Mario Kart 64 came out, I said, maybe Diddy Kong will be playable in the next Mario Kart game. I like made that wish. So I seem to have had the ability to both make the distant future come true, but also fundamentally alter something that Rare already had in development. So when I said, hey, I would love if the next Star Fox game you could run around as Fox McCloud, little did I know that would come true both ways, both in something Rare was going to do and in the I guess proper follow-up to Star Fox 64, if you consider Star Fox Assault that.
Real prosthetic monkey's paw you got there.
So then, of course, after the rumors, we did have the official announcement that Dinosaur Planet would become Star Fox Adventures, Dinosaur Planet. And, we talked a little bit about this on our E3 2001 episode we did last season, Cameron, but the moment that Tricky was mentioned, the first time we saw, I think it was a trailer of Star Fox Adventures Dinosaur Planet, and they mentioned Prince Tricky, it kind of calmed down a lot of jangled nerves. It was like, all right, we're more on board with this idea than we were, because we still have that connection. Tricky is still in it, so we can kind of accept that it's becoming a Star Fox game. There was still some bitterness, some resentment that we'd be losing out on the extended lore that we'd seen, like Randorn and all the other bits. But knowing that it would still be DKU and still follow the same broad beats, even if it was now a sequel to Star Fox 64, I think that was the spoonful of sugar that we needed to make the medicine go down. Like, had they changed Tricky's name to anything, that would have just been the I'm going to set myself on fire stage of the grieving process.
Yeah, it's also just he's the canary in the coal mine, I realize I'm going to invoke some Banjo-Tooie like stuff there, but he's sort of the canary in the coal mine of like, oh, they're not changing that much about this if they didn't change the dinosaur sidekick.
And it was also our first view of the game on GameCube. We'd see nothing but, the N64 iteration of the game up until this point. So seeing it on GameCube in that lush, vibrant, just glorious graphics, like that was just it really did help make that dividing line all the sharper. Like, okay, Dinosaur Planet looked cool. This looks absolutely beautiful. Breathtaking, even. It was also the biggest E3 the fandom ever had, arguably. Like, so any anger that was still there from it becoming Star Fox Adventures, from, Miyamoto, ruining Rare's project. We got Donkey Kong Racing, Diddy Kong Pilot, Coconut Crackers, Grunty's Revenge, Saber Wolf, even. So, we were fine that E3. Like, it was just like, all right, we still have Star Fox Adventures. It's still Dinosaur Planet.
I'm sure we'll get at least 2 of these games.
I'm just saying, it helped that process of acceptance. It helped it along quite a bit. And so, thankfully, it was just a great E3 all around, regardless of what would happen a year or so later. And, of course, what happened a year or so later was the rumors of the buyout and the buyout itself. And this is where I point people to the last episode of the Kongversation, 20 years of the Rare buyout. So get caught up there if you haven't. So there had become sort of this pall, this glumness, this sort of black and white hellscape we suddenly found ourselves in once it became clear that Nintendo wasn't going to buy Rare, and that Rare was probably packing up and looking for greener pastures, because we knew that whatever potential that Star Fox Adventures had as a series, as a brand, as this sub-series within Star Fox itself, was now kaput. It was going to not be a bold new direction that would allow Rare to build their own pocket of the Star Fox IP with its own mythology and repeating characters and evolving narrative. Star Fox Adventures would be a one and done affair, a narrative dead end for both Star Fox and the Dinosaur Planet mythology, which of course didn't turn out to be the case ultimately, but at the time we had no way of knowing what was to come.
I feel like what especially got the imagination running wild was that when this title change was officially revealed, first it wasn't just Star Fox Adventures, it was Star Fox Adventures subtitle Dinosaur Planet. Yep. Which implies, this is a new sub-brand, and we might need to differentiate future titles with these specific subtitles.
Yeah, the game wasn't called Star Fox Adventure. It was Star Fox Adventures, Dinosaur Planet, suggesting many more possible Star Fox Adventures to come.
Which is why we, to this day, joke about Star Fox Adventures Walrus World.
Right.
If they just went down the line of Diddy Kong Racing bosses.
Octopi Planet, which I think grammatically should be Octopus Planet, but, and then, Star Fox Adventures Dragon Rock. Well, I guess that's... Anyway, so... it made it harder. What really, really, felt like... tooth extraction in pain was that they did remove that subtitle. We lost Dinosaur Planet completely, and then they changed the logo to just Star Fox Adventures, which just felt like the nail in the coffin. Okay, this is it. End of the road for both this potential Dinosaur Planet brand and also for Rare with Nintendo. And I'm, of course, speaking from the perspective of being a Rare diehard, Cameron, because Rare diehards were having a tough time when the buyout was rumored, when it was clear that Star Fox Adventures probably wasn't going to get a follow-up, and as our hopes and dreams slowly faded away, we were upset about the whole situation, upset at Nintendo, upset at whatever. But we have to discuss the other side of that. How incensed many Nintendo purists were about Star Fox Adventures. It seems like everybody had some sort of bone to pick with this game. no matter where you found yourself on the dividing line of the conflict. So, I can only speak from secondhand knowledge of this because I wasn't certainly in this camp, but I would say that the angst towards this game from the more Nintendo loyalist side of things was twofold, really. One, before we even get into the buyout, I think Rare was already being viewed with a little bit of suspicion by Nintendo purists because they did have this sort of cult of Rare spring up by the late 1990s. Include myself as part of that, DK Vine and, everything contemporary to it. We were definitely like all about Rare. And this notion, this idea, however true it was, that Nintendo may be being outdone in some ways on their own system, on their own consoles, it's unacceptable. Even if, Rare was a partner at the time of Nintendo, if Nintendo did own 49% of a stake in the studio and were making games exclusively for Nintendo on their systems, that didn't matter because online discourse in the early 2000s meant we had to have flame wars. We had to fight about something, and we didn't really, fight about politics in those days. So we're going to fight about stupid bullshit that didn't matter because we were all on the same side. There were some flame wars between Nintendo and Rare fans, and relations between the two were already breaking down before we even had any inkling that the buyout might be a thing in the future. And so here we have, first of all, Dinosaur Planet. Now Rare's trying to take on Zelda? Fuck that. And wait, now they want to make a Star Fox game that isn't Star Fox 64 2? Well, double fuck that. We hate everything about this. So, number two, once the buyout was in the air, once it was starting to be rumored about, if not outright confirmed, those same fans were viewing Rare as out-and-out traitors. And again, listen to the last episode to understand why that is a hilarious misunderstanding of the situation. It wasn't like that at all, but that's how people definitely viewed it at the time, lacking any context, any nuance to the situation. So all of a sudden, like 2002, you started to see a lot of historical revisionism going on about everything Rare had done for Nintendo, all of these blockbuster games they had made that you could rent at Blockbuster. And it was like day and night. It was like all of a sudden everything changed. And suddenly the Donkey Kong Country trilogy was overrated trash, something that people only liked for the technically impressive, for the time, graphics and the sound, but it fell dramatically short of the gameplay brilliance of the Super Mario Brothers games, aside from Super Mario Brothers 2, which of course wasn't a real Mario game. And Diddy Kong Racing's gameplay, it wasn't as fun as Mario Kart 64. Oh yeah, it did that well, but as a racer, it just wasn't as good. Oh, Mario Kart 64 was so much fun.
There was a lot of not defining why there was anything wrong with these games.
Yeah, but they had to find something to pick at.
Or in the case of we'll get to it after Banjo-Kazooie, I guess, but like we already established, Banjo-Kazooie already was in a which is better, Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie debate, but
right.
Even when it came out, Donkey Kong 64 was getting flack from people for the sheer overload of stuff to collect in it.
Which, granted, I'm not saying all criticism of Rare was unwarranted in this era, because, yeah.
Oh, no, that is a valid criticism of Donkey Kong 64. The issue is, in the aftermath of the buyout, that criticism got applied retroactively to everything Rare had ever made, and in some, pretty straw-graspy ways.
And keep in mind, this wasn't just like Nintendo fans on Nintendo forums on the internet. This was magazines like Game Informer and other publications. This was Nintendo's UK magazine. You just saw like all this vitriol out of nowhere for Donkey Kong Country. And it's like, what? Where's this coming from? Other than, oh, we know where it's coming from. It's because we have to find a reason to be okay with Rare no longer being a part of Nintendo. So if we just pretend like we've never enjoyed any of their games, that will help get everybody through it. But yeah, Banjo.
Or if we pretend everything that was ever good was because of some people who left.
Oh yeah. So Banjo-Kazooie, you know, they can't really pick apart at the gameplay of Banjo-Kazooie. So what they do there is they say, well, it wasn't innovative. It was basically just copying Super Mario 64. So regardless of how much fun it was to play, it wasn't innovative. So Nintendo wins. And yeah, as you already said, as you alluded to, they couldn't really find anything to pick apart about GoldenEye because there wasn't really a direct comparison to anything Nintendo had done as far as GoldenEye goes. So they smoothed that over by just saying, well, GoldenEye 007, yes, that was the one good game Rare made, but all those people left Rare, so that does not count. Not a Rare game. Yeah, so that is where we suddenly found ourselves. Keep in mind, this is what the discourse was before the buyout was even official. This was the run-up to Star Fox Adventures. This is the world that DK Vine was finding itself, even as, you know, we were kind of stepping away for a time to launch a webcomic and giving DK Vine into the hands of people on our forum. It was like, wow, like, I feel like everything has shifted pretty dramatically overnight, and all of a sudden, all these beloved games from the past 8 years, like the bulk of our childhood, it was now trash. It was now being like labeled as never good, and our entire lives were a lie. Well, cool. Good time to step away from DK Vine. So yeah, obviously Star Fox Adventures was going to be garbage as well.
Yeah, similarly to how we described last episode, where or on the buyout episode, that Ghoulies kind of got stuck with being sent out to die on the cross of being Rare's first Xbox game and not being Banjo-Kazooie or Perfect Dark. Star Fox Adventures was saddled with, this is Rare's final game on a Nintendo console, and there has to be something wrong with it to justify to ourselves that Nintendo was completely in the right to let them go.
Yeah. This sucked, Cameron. Like, I remember how badly this sucked, and I didn't have the perspective to deal with it at the time because I hadn't lived through something like this. I was still basically a teenager with a teenage brain, and I didn't, you know, my brain wasn't fully developed yet, so I let it get to me. I did. I didn't really, you know, wrap up my entire identity as being a Rare fan, as being a fan of the DKU, but it meant a lot to me for sure. So,
and a lot of the time I'll think back on this and think you know, when I was a kid, it probably wasn't anywhere near as bad as it felt at the time, where, because you know, you kind of, you can kind of do this immature thing where you wrap your self-worth up in the things you like, and so an attack on them feels like an attack on you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're really not self-assured, and you don't know your place in the world, and you don't really know who you are yet. That journey of self-discovery that we all go on, and we really don't have figured out at 19 or however young you were at the time. So yeah, I mean, it definitely hurt. And of course, I hadn't lived through this yet, where something that I loved was suddenly out of, here's the word again, zeitgeist. And this is before everything came back around again, and there was nostalgia for the things that I loved, and it was acceptable again. It was cool to like them again, and we're gonna celebrate the history of Rare and what they did for Nintendo. But we weren't there yet. So for all I knew, this was going to be the status quo for the rest of days. People were just going to hate everything that I loved. And it meant so much to me that I could never join them. I could never go to the dark side. So I was just going to be on the outside looking in. And so, yeah, it was in this environment that my infamous story of that GameStop manager arguing with me not to reserve Star Fox Adventures at the store that he managed took place. And I keep bringing this up every time I have a chance to on the conversation, because what the hell?
Yeah, when I say that things probably weren't as bad as I remember them being in my head, this is the kind of thing that makes me think, well, maybe they were.
Yeah, this wasn't just arguing with the troll on the Insider Forum or on DK Vine. This was a real live encounter with somebody who should have wanted my money, my $5 down to reserve Star Fox Adventures. And he was like, no, it's going to be garbage. Rare sucks, and it's not even a real Star Fox game, and it's going to be a joke, and I'm not going to take your reservation.
Wow, so, like not even like just trying to talk you out of it, but just like would not do it.
It eventually just ended with, yeah, no. And I was like,
wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it was for the best, Cameron, because I went to Circuit City, aka Red Best Buy, and
aka Spirit Halloween.
Right. And I got their reservation bonus. They had the best Star Fox Adventures bonus here in the US. It was reserve Star Fox Adventures at Circuit City and get the Star Fox Adventures Survival Kit. And if you'll excuse me, I need to bend over and pick it up because I have it right here with me to this day. Let me go grab it. Sorry, I had Battletoads sunglasses on top of it. I had to move some things around. So here I have in my hands the Star Fox Adventures Survival Kit. It's a little bit sun faded, not too bad. So it's got Fox McCloud and Dracor behind him, and it's got the broken pieces of Saria behind both of them. And yeah, it says Star Fox Adventure Survival Kit. It's got the little like red cross, like the Swedish. I don't know.
Which I think this was before they like clamped down on unauthorized use of that.
Yeah,
a lot more.
But it's like it's a med kit, right? And you got the original Rareware logo prominent on the box. You got Nintendo GameCube and the Circuit City logo, which is three things that no longer exist. And yeah, on the back it says Adventure Survival Kit contents. Power up with Fox Fuel as you defend Dinosaur Planet. Keep your mind at the game at all times, in quotes, with game tip toilet paper. Keep them out with your custom door hanger while you battle General Scales. While General Scales faints. So I'm going to open this up. I still have the entire contents in here. Sans the contents of the Fox Fuel, which I did drink. Probably would have eaten through the bottle at this point. Because it is just Jones soda. Jones is oh my god, there's still some Fox Fuel in the bottom. It's swishing around in here. Oh my god, Cameron, I could taste Fox Fuel today if I wanted to. 20-year-old.
It in all of my like eBay crawls, because I missed out on this survival kit when it was new, because I didn't buy Star Fox Adventures at a Circuit City. Like I have occasionally seen the survival kit turn up online. Like, I could afford that, but the Fox Fuel always puts me off because it's either I'm buying a drink that definitely hasn't kept in 20 years,
yeah,
or a empty bottle that somebody else drank out of.
Yeah, so I'm just sniffing the top of the bottle right now, and it smells vaguely of vinegar. You know, if I'm ever going to drink this little remnant of Fox Fuel, that should be on camera. So I'm going to save that for a future potential DK Vine event. But yeah,
it's what all our streams are now. Drinking sodas.
That's true. Yeah, the Idaho crew just drank the mystery flavor of Baja Blast on their stream, which apparently just tastes like Baja Blast, but with a worse aftertaste. So yeah, Jones Soda, I think it was like, is Jones Soda still even around? I don't see it anymore.
I'm not entirely sure. I thought it went away, but no, their website's still active.
Okay.
I guess I just don't see it very much anymore.
Well, yeah, because back in 2002, there wasn't a lot in the way of like craft drinks. Like you would have Coke and Pepsi and RC, and then you would have the generic brands. But you know, as far as like this like indie drink company, it wasn't really in vogue outside of probably some major cities. But Jones Soda was one of the first that was like this alternate soda brand, and they had the green apple soda, which I think was their big get, because it was just completely unlike anything you would get from the major brands. Didn't have caffeine in it, but it tasted pretty good. Tasted like, you know, a little bit sour apple, but still crisp. And that's what Fox Fuel was, actually. It was their green apple soda with a special label on it that said Star Fox Adventures Fox Fuel, and had Fox, Crystal, and General Scales on it, along with the GameCube and Rare logo. And yeah, it says fuel up with Fox McCloud as you journey the first adventure outside of the R-Wing Starfighter cockpit. Battle your way to defeat General Scales as you defend the world that is known as Dinosaur Planet, trademark. Drink up and play hard. www.nintendo.com. So, like, full disclosure, a couple years after this, I did religiously buy Jones Green Apple Soda just to get a taste of Fox Fuel. Eventually, I stopped drinking it when I realized that the only reason to drink soda would be the caffeine hit. And then eventually, I pretty much gave up soda altogether when I realized I could just find caffeine through other resources and drink carbonated water. But yeah, I got the door hanger in here. It says, "Do not enter. Adventure in progress." This is a cheap ass door hanger. It's like cardboard and like very thin. And but the big selling point, there's the Star Fox Adventures air freshener. Can't imagine that's kept.
A lot of these things are very like disposable or have a short shelf life.
Yeah, so this is the render of Fox holding Crystal's staff, and it says, "A planet with fear needs a hero with none." And I think Fox is plenty scared throughout it, but that was the tagline they used in the commercials. So, but yeah, it's still sealed, and this is this actually, this air freshener is by the company Boy Toy. Boy Toy. Right, you'd think they would be marketing some other stuff, like, yeah, here's Crystal Staff. But anyway, yeah, so I could still rock this Star Fox Adventures air freshener, put it up in my car if I ever wanted, but can't imagine it still smells good. There's a lanyard, a Star Fox Adventures lanyard that you can, I don't know, switch out when you go to E3 and then, you know, represent Star Fox Adventures. But the piece of resistance, the jewel in the crown, of course, is the Star Fox Adventures toilet paper, Cameron. Star Fox Adventures Game Tips toilet paper. I just did a tweet about this the other week, and I put it in the Great Mighty Pooh plush's mouth. And it kind of took off a little bit because apparently people don't know this existed, that they actually gave away Star Fox Adventures toilet paper, an entire roll of it. I still have it sealed and it's plastic, but some of the game tips you got on here that I can see are drop and roll. A hard landing following a long fall will take a bite out of your energy meter. If you press the X button to roll as you make contact with the ground, you'll walk away undamaged. That's a pretty good tip to give to somebody just starting from the game. Shake and take. Dumbledang pods grow on trees. Use the first-person view to look up at tall palm trees. If you see energy replenishing pods among the leaves, you'll be able to knock them to the ground by hitting the trunks with your staff. And we'll just give one more. Watch closely. Story sequences sometimes reveal secrets. You'll see fuel cells in the background of the Ice Mountain sequence, where Sharpclaws take off on jet bikes to follow Prince Tricky. You can pick up those cells if you return to Ice Mountain later. As far as tips go on toilet paper, I'd say they're pretty good. They're not completely useless, and
if I remember right, I tried to like look at a list of all the tips, and I think fortunately the roll does repeat, so you don't have to like unfurl an entire roll of toilet paper just to read this game guide.
Yeah, so I mean, I have to be honest though. Back during the height of the pandemic, when COVID first hit worldwide, and there was the bizarre shortage of toilet paper, which I think is mostly attributed to just people panic buying. I was scared for my role because I thought people might break into my house looking for toilet paper, and they would find that roll and take it from me and use it on their buttocks.
Now I'm just worried how eerily prescient the rest of the contents are going to be. Is there going to be like a zombie outbreak, and the only way we can fend them off is Star Fox Adventures door hangers?
It's the only thing that repels them, yeah. I don't know. All I know is I'm glad to have the survival kit, because if worse came to worse, I would have that toilet paper roll, and who knows what else. That last swig of Jones soda might save my life one day. All right, I'm trying to put it all back. All right, there we go. All right, so yeah, I went to Circuit City, got my Star Fox Adventures survival kit, and getting the game the very week the buyout was announced was surreal. I've already talked about the general sense of despair that was happening, not just with the fact that the buyout was happening, but with the discourse around Rare and Star Fox Adventures itself, where I couldn't even reserve the game without getting shit talked. So I was feeling weird getting this brand new Rare game, this brand new DKU game for the GameCube, knowing that it would be the last Rare game on the GameCube, maybe the last Rare game ever for a Nintendo system, which thankfully was not the case. But, I can't remember, because back in those days, I think there were relaxer release dates at the time, because the game officially came out Monday, September 23rd. The buyout was announced Tuesday, September 24th. So I don't know if stores actually had it on Monday. This is before Nintendo switched to Friday releases. And so it was mostly just if a store got a game early, or if whenever it rolled in, it would be available to sell. There's no strict on sale date so much.
And it wasn't like being policed as much because, well, there wasn't like a Twitter or Reddit for somebody to run to and say, I got the game a week early. Here's the entire first 6 hours.
And I don't think game piracy, while it definitely existed, I don't think it was as much a concern. But yeah, so it might have been that Monday I got it. It might have been the Wednesday after the buyout. I honestly don't remember. All I remember is I did skip class because it was my freshman year of college, and I suddenly understood that, wait a second, if I don't show up for class, it's not a big deal. Like I'm not going to get written up or anything. I'm in college. Hey, I'll just go get Star Fox Adventures. That was a liberating moment, and I took advantage of that way too much, to the point of near ruin. But yeah, that first autumn where I suddenly had more freedoms as an adult, and yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm not going in today. Whatever, I know what I'm supposed to do. So I went to get Star Fox Adventures and got my survival kit with it, which is cool. And I remember just driving around a bit, driving through town and out into the countryside with it in my passenger seat, like my I was gonna say whittle baby, but you don't want to put whittle babies in the passenger seat, so we'll say it's like my my adolescent child. It was perfectly safe and legal to put in the passenger seat. And I just had that melancholy. I was like, is this it? Is this the end? Is this where the story of my fandom and the Donkey Kong universe truly ends? And if that's the case, will I have to savor this? Will I have to make this last because I don't know what's to come? So what was to come, Cameron? Well, on part 2 of our Spotlight series, we will be discussing the world of Dinosaur Planet, and we will discuss the actual game and what it was like to spend time with Crystal, briefly, Fox McCloud, and Prince Tricky, who, as you all now know, is obviously the very same Tricky as the one from Diddy Kong Racing.
This has been a File 2 production.
¡Qué rico!